Well, hello there. Hi. We're live.
Mostly.
He's live.
So is he. And we're both here
Kind of.
on a very summery day.
Yeah, it's warm here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Not sure where you're all from, but June. Hey, it's Juneteenth. So happy Juneteenth to everybody.
This is a good thing.
Yeah. So we're here. This is TSG Live Talking Trains once again. And we have a slightly different setup. You can't tell because it probably looks exactly the same to you. But we have things set up a little bit different here. And without my glasses, I still can't read that. So
Really?
I'm going to be looking at the computer the whole time, I think.
Oh, okay. I can read from here thanks to the wonders of modern medicine.
Yeah, you had the special eye fixed.
Yes, I had both cataracts done over the last couple of years, and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
Looks like we have Ray here, and Sparky's here, and Dave Hammer's here, and Sid's here. Everybody's here. And of course, everybody that I didn't mention is also here. So we have a fun program. Well, I think it'll be a fun program. We're going to be talking about ways to operate your models more prototypically. And sort of what gave me the idea to have this program was during the PCR convention a few months ago, I think it was late April, our friend Mike Osborne, who's been on the channel here recently a couple of times actually, did a clinic that was all about operating stuff more like how they run real trains. And I say they run real trains because Mike's a real railroader, like for real railroader. He's been working in class 1 railroad industry for 40 some odd plus years. And so, don't let his young looks fool you. He's actually really old. And, he uses Grecian hair formulas to keep his hair dark. He's laughing off screen right now. I can see him down here busting up. See, this is actually, Murf, I just came across a really good technique, which is to do all the insults when he's not on screen so that he can't throw them back at me.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. I feel kind of cowardly doing that though. So why don't we bring Mike up and we'll start our discussion. And I do want to mention before I bring him up, we have this little thing on the right side of your screen. That's the live chat. And you can type in questions. And especially if you have questions about how the prototype railroaders, the real railroaders do stuff, we're going to have Mike on and he'll answer all those questions. And if he doesn't answer the question, I'll just make something up. So
is somebody monitoring the YouTube feed as well?
Someone is monitoring the YouTube feed today. We are not flying solo, as I call it. Yeah, and she's in here. So anyway, let me bring Mike up. Hopefully he's ready. He was taking care of some other business, not what you're thinking before we went live here. The business that I need to take care of right now. I hope I can go for the whole show, Murf. Otherwise, you might see me with my cup down here filling it up, All right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it.
I'm usually more on top of this when I'm drinking wine, but there we go.
Yeah, we don't have wine today, so we're using our amazing TSG mugs instead.
That Vin is now showing you.
Yeah. So let's bring Mike up here, and there he is. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing today?
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I didn't hear anything that you talked about me before. Hopefully it was all good.
Oh yeah, no, we didn't say anything about you before we went on.
Not at all.
No, nothing.
I'm glad you didn't, because I'll make my screen a blank screen.
Always insult the guests before you bring them on. That's a great policy.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That's what we do here at this show.
Actually, it seems to be the way the late night shows do it too. I've heard them say awful things about their guests, and they're really nice to their guests once they're on. So we're only following precedent. It's all good.
Yeah, big hug.
That's right.
Yeah. After all, he's Guillermo.
That's right. Right, boss.
Right. So Mike, you had an interesting clinic at the PCR convention, and the thing is, doing what I do, I meet a lot of people who do a lot of different things, including actual railroaders. And you have answers to questions that a lot of the people say that I've met trackside would love to opine and talk like they know what they're talking about, but you know they're not accurate when they say stuff because it doesn't sound right. And quite often it's like, no, I know that's not how they do it because I know these guys and that's not how they do it. So having someone lend their expertise and, really decades of experience doing what you do, I think will provide insight that you don't really get elsewhere. So thank you for coming on. That's the nice thing I'm saying, and I'm actually being serious about that. I'll tell you the insulting stuff later when we're off camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to say about the PCR convention, I know John always mentions this on his YouTube channels, but if you haven't attended one, they're a lot of fun. Meet a lot of great people, make some new friends. You can see a lot of great layouts. There was a little mini swap meet and, some great models that were on display, and you'll end up making some nice friends and then, really expand your knowledge of the hobby. Even some clinics that I thought I wouldn't be interested in were quite interesting. And you can also, put the names behind the faces and see some old friends like Jim Radke. I saw him and it was great seeing him. Great guy. And
he was one of our favorite guys. So up here.
Right. And everybody was staying in the hotel. The hotel was beautiful. And like 2 Saturdays ago, Phil Edholm, the president of your PCR area, he came down to my house for a run session on the LA Ops and had a great time. He stole 2 car cards. He gave them back to me at the banquet. So that was
happens.
Nice.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, these guys that wear the aprons, you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend that has an outdoor layout, and he uses erasers for handbrakes on the cars. You just put them in his wheel chocks behind the thing. And I swear every time there's an operating session over there, I come home and reach into a pocket, and sure enough, I've counted coup on his layout and grabbed another brake from it. At the end of the year, I try to get them all back to him. But
Phil gave some delightful gifts. He gave us a little flashlight with I meant to bring it in, a flashlight with a little skewer to uncouple cars and have a light so you can also see it better.
Yeah, the uncoupling things. Yeah.
Yeah, he
uncoupling
3D
tools.
printed them.
What's funny? Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's funny is that recently I went and operated it was 2 weeks ago on an N scale layout. And, I've only operated on Jeff Abbott's N scale prior to that. And the operations I did on Jeff's beautiful Southern Pacific layout had nothing to do with any switching. So I did not have to use an uncoupling, tool at all. Well, this guy that we operated at his layout, Steve Van Meter, I think that the layout tour just came out last weekend. It's a really nice N scale layout that's done, operations based. And I was worried about uncoupling with the skewers because, we just use wooden skewers.
Right.
But it worked really well, even better, I think, than they do in HO scale, which I thought was kind of cool. But what I was going to say is he has flashlights everywhere because the key to seeing stuff when it's that small is not glasses, although they do half the work. It's light. Because if I can't read, I'm like this. I cannot read stuff in the dark. I just can't. Like you go to a nice restaurant and they have the lights turned down low. I can't read the menu if it's written small because it's too dark. Right. So Steve said, the owner of this N scale layout over here in Alameda, said, use the flashlights to read the reporting marks on the cars. Because, N scale's this big and the letters are, super, and the numbers are super tiny. And if you're looking for a flat car, forget it. I mean, because you can't see the numbers at all in the flat cars. Well, but with the lights, I was able to see them. And he has little flashlights everywhere where you do switching. So having the flashlight on the uncoupling tool is also really good. So I get it.
Yeah, and just to mention, for people that don't know, I hired out in the Southern Pacific in 1979. And of course, it was taken over by the Rio Grande and then the Union Pacific in 96. So that's my experience. And I've always worked as a conductor brakeman the whole time. I've never worked in any other craft on the railroad. Some people work as clerks or something, but no, I did hire out as a trainman. I'm not an engineer, for those that sometimes, change. I've only been a brakeman and conductor, and never really, not that I didn't want to become an engineer, but just for various reasons. And I always like being on the ground, getting out, not always getting out, of course, when it's pouring down rain or something, but it's been good over the years, and I'll probably be tying up pretty soon for the final time here this year. I think I'm about done, and let the younger guys handle it now.
Well, that was part of the thing I was talking about on the opening. I was saying how young you look.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sleep.
Is that
sleep? Yeah.
Wading in the hole.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our first comment. They say time is money on the railroad. Does that mean most of the time we're doing switching moves too slowly on our model railroads? Oh, contraire, Dave. Yeah, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, because that's in my list of. I have a list of stuff that I made while we were eating our lunch, of ideas of how to do things. What I perceive as more prototypical. Mostly, my idea of slowing. And I don't know. Maybe we should just start this conversation with this. My idea of doing things prototypically on a model railroad is slow down, because I have noticed when people are operating at op sessions, a lot of people are in a hurry and they get all stressed out too. Like, oh my God, I need to finish this job. No, you don't. You don't need to finish the job. You need to have fun. Your only goal as an operator on an op session is to have fun. That's me. If you're doing, what do you think, Murf? You operate a lot. What's your goal?
There are times I've tried to optimize my switching things in order to get them done more efficiently, but in general, it ends up making things a little bit quicker, but that isn't the goal. I'm trying to think in terms of just what would be less wear and tear on the locomotive and the poor guy on the ground walking between switches and all that kind of stuff. And I really want to know from Mike, is that a rational way to think of it?
Yeah, in a lot of ways too, and you also got to remember too, if you, on the prototype, if you're putting the wrong car in the wrong industry, that costs everybody money and could possibly shut down production at the industry. A lot of these companies are waiting for these cars, and they've, in any industry, anybody that's worked in any kind of a factory knows that, if you need a product, you need a product, not yesterday, not tomorrow, you need it today. And, a lot of, just like today at one of our customers, International Paper out in Camarillo, California, they will be, as we cut away, they threw their derail over to protect their people from, us coming back in there. And they opened those doors up, and they're right on there to unroll the rolls of paper. They make cardboard boxes for the fruit industry out there in Camarillo. And they normally get, today they got, 5 cars. And the 5 cars, they get on a normal basis. Their spur holds 5 cars, and they can unload them. They put a ramp in, and they're ready to go. And there's probably about 20 of those large rolls of craft paper inside each car. And their production is totally based around the railroad. They get all those. I'm sure they could truck them in if they wanted to, but they definitely depend on the railroad. And for a while, we had a derailment in their spur, and it took about 3 days to fix the track up. And then we were giving him 2 switches a day. We'd hung around and then come out there a second time around 1 p.m. And they would unload 5, and then they called in a night shift. That's just how much they considered it, important to get those cars unloaded for their production.
So one of the things I've seen owners do of model railroads to make switching more interesting is have industries with this car goes to this track, this spot, this track, this spot, etc. do you have to order where spots are in particular single tracks often or not? Or does that ever happen?
Oh yeah, it happens a lot in different places. Like especially like in the General Motors factory. I worked a job for I worked at Regular for probably 4 years at night. It was went to work at 8 p.m. and this it would normally get, the plant would get I'll say about 27 cars in our spot, and those cars had to be in exact order, and because they were based on taking the auto parts out of these box cars and putting them actually right on the assembly line. And then they had, one of their tracks was for like the motors and the transmissions, and another track was like large parts like mufflers, and another track had tires. So you can't mix them up, and that was for a 5 a.m. deadline on the cars. And one car out of place would go ahead.
Would the cars come in then incorrect order, or did you actually have to do some
absolutely no order they came in? Yeah, because
so you had to.
They were coming in, from all different railroads. They were coming in from assembly plants all over the United States. So some of them were like a few were like in Grand Blanc, Michigan. One was in Texas. The glass came in off from someplace in Tracy, California. Just to mention a few places. And so there was Conrail cars, Norfolk Southern, CSX, SP, and they would need those cars in exact order. And that was a place that they actually had a red phone in our yard office that connected to General Motors. No dial on it. It was just like a bat phone.
Bat phone.
If they wanted something, they got
Commissioner Gordon wants to talk to you, Mike.
Yeah.
So how long would a switching job like that take?
Oh, it would take us, depending on how good you were, you had to go and sit around about an hour and actually look for all the cars. They would have them on the switch list. They would actually have little designations on where they went. And then you would, mark them all out. And you generally would like sort all the cars for like, say, track 8 out at one track, and then track 7 another track, track 6 another track. And then you would further refine them to the point where they would go into the plant. One of the tracks held 18 86-foot box cars, the actual body parts of the car, of the for their cars that they were making at this plant. The Pontiac Firebirds at the time I was doing it. And I've actually written an article on that.
Over a quarter mile.
Easily a quarter mile. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how he keeps in shape.
Yeah. That job, a lot of people wouldn't work this job because they had a lot of work, and you were kicking cars for like probably close to 2 to 3 hours constantly. And then anyway, so if you finished around, a good crew would finish it by around 12:30, and then you had to wait, and then you had to go pull the empties out from the daylight shift. And so you pull the empties from the daylight shift, then start respotting the tracks. The respotting wouldn't take all that long, but once you had them in order. And then they occasionally, if they were really busy, they would take off like the 4 cars off a track and put in 4 more cars. And you had to hang around what was called fire watch. And then, they even called the job for a while, they called it the jammy job, because you could actually just literally go to sleep and then wait for them if they needed anything special. You were there right on the premises.
Wow.
There was an engineer that lived really close by, and I would actually go over his condo, and then you'd fall asleep, and you could really fall asleep on somebody's couch pretty good if you're tired. And I'd hear the phone ring at his house, and I'd hear him go, "Yep, what do you want? What do you want? Yeah, we'll be down in 5 minutes. All right, we got it." But I mean, that was high tech, and if there was a problem, they would call San Francisco, and then that.
Wow.
Trainmaster would be there, and that's how important it was. So you did not mess this job up. A funny story. I won't get too much into stories, but there was a guy that he didn't have the wherewithal to do it. What he would do is he would go out in the yard and literally chalk on each car where each car went. So he'd put like 818, 83, 82, and he'd literally go out and find every single car. And that was all fine. It worked out great because then he didn't have to look at the car numbers anymore. Just look for his chalk marks. Well, it worked out great for about a week till those cars went back to Pittsburgh or Grand Blanc, Michigan, and they came back, and now, without being erased, now the same chalk marks. Then the next day, he had them all messed up. When he came in.
So you'd actually get the same cars back? Sometimes?
Oh, yeah, of course, because they were all in auto parts, dedicated auto parts services. And they actually went back as loads because they have racks that they would hang on like the hoods of the cars, and they would put like, say, 20 in one rack, and those racks had to go back to those
to the same places, huh?
Yeah, the stamping plants. Yeah.
Well, I just had an idea for, modelers are always looking for ideas of, weathering and all that kind of detailing their cars, which would be to have a chalk mark that some, conductor wrote and make it look like it got erased with some towel or, miscellaneous piece of something and put a new, nicer, better one over the top of it. That would look pretty cool. That would be totally accurate, wouldn't it?
Hey, good idea for a decal set too. Yeah. That kind of detail is, I do have a auto parts plant on my layout, or an auto assembly plant. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing. It took one of the Southern California ops, it took the operator about 3 hours to do the plant, and I spotted in my plant holds for about 10 cars. So he had to line them up. It took him about that long. And
I didn't do the auto job on your layout.
I kind of refined it, and this time, and I had more. I decided to try it out. Somebody else did that last time. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have on your layout specific doors that they have to go to? Specific cars?
Oh yeah, I do. I do it the same way because I want it to be authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. That is another way to slow an op session down, is requiring the operators to spot specific cars at specific doors or specific spots. Having stuff in the way is another thing that people, layout owners do. They'll have cars that aren't supposed to be taken, but they're kind of in the way. So you got to move them out of the way before you put your stuff in.
And a lot of places have respots. So they have cars that they didn't finish unloading, so they want them back on the same spots. Another place that they do right now, UP, I've never actually worked it, but I heard about it. They have a General Electric appliance warehouse here in Los Angeles, and the different kinds of appliances come from different General Electric manufacturing plants, like refrigerators, washers and dryers, whatever. And they have specific places in their plant or their warehouse where they want only the refrigerators and then only the washer dryers. They don't want to be forklifting. Some of these warehouses, you've seen them, they can be huge, and they don't want to be forklifting them all the way farther than they need to. And
sure.
In fact, like I say, General Motors would literally take the parts out and go right to the, when you went in there while the plant was operating, there'd be, sparks of flying, and because they would be taking the parts out, turning around and loading them right on that assembly line.
There's something else.
Into a new auto.
Yeah, there's something else that people might not think about, which is the interior of a plant like that might even have a partition in between this door and the one next to it. So they couldn't unload a car over here and just forklift the crap over to the other department because there's no way to get through the wall. So there's all kinds of, right? There's all kinds of.
I didn't mention this, but literally in that GM plant, I believe there was only 2, but they had these large ramps that actually went between the box cars,
Mm-hmm.
So their own people could forklift across the railroad tracks to get to other parts of the plant, or use the Cushman vehicles, or just flat out walking around to do whatever they had to do, go to the bathroom, or go talk to the supervisor, or supervisor coming over to check. But those
Yeah.
ramps went down, and that's the only way they could get to work. So
Wow.
I even remember the guy coming down there when it was late and saying, I got 2,400 people, sitting around waiting for you guys to finish this,
Right.
making, dollars. And,
So,
that's so important, is say the meaningless, they can't have cars not spotted
so Mike,
properly.
I've heard it said that switching doesn't scale, meaning that time spent on a real railroad doing switching is kind of almost linear to time spent on a model railroad doing switching. Do you feel that's true, or do you feel that you can run things a little bit quicker on a model railroad? Or
Well, I think it depends on your operators. But the model, don't forget the distances. Like, we have one of our customers, Procter and Gamble, they make Charmin and Brawny paper towels. Their spur to get there is a mile and a half long off the main line. So when we pull out of our yard, which is 2 miles away, we back in, and somebody's riding the point all the way back 2 miles. Then there's the gate openings, which you have to open the gates. They have 3 gates, and then you make the pulls, respot the cars, or spot the new cars in their plan, and then pull all the way out. So it takes about 25 minutes minimum to get from the main line to things, sometimes a little longer if they didn't unload one car in the middle or something. And that's something to think about too. You can always throw that in. Even if you have 3 cars, you have one in the middle that's not unloaded, and it goes back.
right.
And
So,
I know a lot of these OPSIG. I'm a member of the OPSIG group, and they do articles on this kind of thing all the time. But
yeah.
maybe people just don't think about it.
So then, do you run a fast clock on your layout?
No, I don't even bother with that. I think I don't bother with fast clocks, radios, or anything. I actually have my industries kind of separate. I do have large scale size industries though.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like you do.
yeah, like they
Well,
look like I only
each part,
model the backdrop. So
yeah, each part of your layout, each segment of your layout is really its own industry, isn't it? If I remember right, like that
sort of,
brewery
yeah.
that I switched
sort
out in
of,
that
yeah.
little alcove seemed like its own little industry. And thinking about the whole thing about switching, scaling down, not scaling down, or scaling down. I think you made the right point, Mike. Of course, it scales down because the sheer distance you have to travel is nowhere near, as far as it is on the prototype. So it's compressed as much as the yard or the spur or the distance between the 2 places is compressed out, right, on a model.
Right.
One of the interesting comments made, I remember Jack Burgess mentioned on his layout tour here on this channel that it would be cool to have a 1-to-1 model with no compression until you have an old supermarket or a warehouse and model something really to scale with no compression until you realize that it would take you 5 minutes to do your runaround because the yard is so big, and
Right.
you have to walk 100 feet just to do a runaround. I think most people that are doing model railroading don't want that much distance. So it compresses. It seems to me like it compresses as much as the distance is compressed
Right.
down. So, and then, you don't have air tests. You don't have,
Coupling the hoses, tying
right?
hand
Coupling the
brakes.
hoses. Yeah. Stretching the train, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
everything really on a model is compressed one way or the other. So
Right. Like I have a couple, the Budweiser industry, and the GM for that matter. If you're coupling your cars together, if you're getting ready to shove an industry, you can't have cars that aren't connected. So if we were to shove the GM plant and have one come apart and just keep rolling, it's happened, of course. Where somebody didn't do it right, and it would roll through the front of the building.
Oh.
And you know, that's just major damage, and not to mention the fact you can easily kill somebody.
Yeah.
You know? And
There's
those kind of things.
There's another reason to slow down in real life.
Yeah. And you know, the stretching of the, you know, like I've seen modelers, you know, they'll just go against the car and start shoving it. You know, that's all fine and dandy, but you know, if the prototype doesn't do stuff like that, unless you know the car's just not going to go anywhere. I had a conductor that was always in a super hurry down in Anaheim once, and great guy to work with after work, but he would really go crazy at work. He was like an insane asylum. So I had made a coupling on a car, and a car without air, and the coupler didn't make. And you know, I kind of look down there and I see it. He's like watching what I'm doing, and he just gives a big highball with his lantern. I go, okay, whatever. I guess he's gonna, you know, let it roll by itself. He doesn't care if it's made, he just wants to shove it. So we were going about a half mile, and all of a sudden I'm looking at him, and I see his lantern give what they call an easy sign. And so the engineer backs off of it, and there goes him riding that car, like 5 cars by themselves. and you know, he just tied a handbrake and stopped him. He didn't say a word to me because he knew that he had messed up. And that was, we did have radios, but he had a radio that didn't charge his battery. And of course, this guy would be on your case if you did something wrong. So we got back to the office. I said, don't you ever come to work on a lantern or an operable radio again. And he just goes, F you. But that's the type of guy this guy was. But you know, after work he was.
That's railroad terminology. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm getting that authentic at least.
But I just gave him back what he would obviously have browbeat us into. You know.
Wow. Yeah.
Did you catch that? So Murf does not compress the cussing out of the job.
Yeah.
Right.
On the model version.
Right. Yeah. And then don't forget, you know, you're also, you know, maybe working in rain. You know, I haven't really worked a whole lot in snow in Southern California. You know, the few times, you know, it's happened, and night, you know, and a lot of people I think don't realize this, which is, you know, when I hired out till I think about 1984, nobody had handsets. It was all done with lanterns, so you had to pay attention to everybody on your crew, what they were doing, and pass signals with hand lanterns. I'm actually going to do a video, hopefully, on hand signals, but you had to spread out, and you had to watch every minute. It's not like I could just tell you on the radio and go, hey, John, line that switch. Hey, John, lock that switch up. You know, now, you know, you had to have signs for things, and like a lock the switch would be like this, you know, lock it up. And, you know, you had to be careful of those kind of things and watch all the time, because these guys would only give them to you once. But,
right.
You know, but so everybody's talking on their radios and things, and, you know, the little radios. So that's why I don't really have them. You know, I don't think they're that necessary. And so you could call on the phone like Seth's thing, and, you know, if you need to know something, call on the phone. His, you know, Seth
rolls up too far.
Yes.
So Sparky was asking, have you been at industries where they have their own switchers and trackmobiles and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, those are probably the abnormal places. Most places aren't that big. And now I know, like a lot of customers, like at Budweiser, they will roll their own cars. They have them on a slight grade, and the grain cars, as they would unload one, they would let it roll out, and they had ropes like a ship, and they would tie them around a spindle they could turn, and they could pull them around. And but I can't even think of, maybe, like, I think Arco in Long Beach had their own switcher, so you would just shove them in the gate and let them switch their own cars out. But for the most part, I think at the harbor, there were some places they would unload coal. Of course, we wouldn't get involved in, you know, actually putting each coal in the dumper. You know, the UP or the SP would never get involved in that type of an operation. But those are the abnormal for sure. And another thing about switching industries I could mention really quick is there was another brewery there right where we work, and now they had only one track, or actually two tracks, but they had the box cars on the end, then the tank cars, then the grain cars. So they had to be in that order because the grain unloading for them was first, then the tank car for the sweetener, and then the box cars for the finished product. And then they also had another track that went along the box cars so they could put a ramp in one side from the dock, then open the other side of the boxcar, and they have a dual ramp, let's say, to get into the next boxcar. So they'd load the outside boxcars first, finish that one, then go to the next boxcar and load the inside of that one. You don't see that very often, but that's a kind of a neat operation, really.
Cool. It would be hard to model that anyway, because you'd have to have ramps in between your cars, doors that open, right? So
well, and don't forget, too. Well, if you have the same box cars, they would all line up because some of the industries, they have specific box cars that they would unload, and they want specific sizes and things like that because they knew exactly how much of their product would fit in that car. So they don't take, a lot of places don't like any kind of box cars. They're willy-nilly. And I will say one thing, real prototype railroading right now is I'm starting to see the end of the 50-foot car. The 50-foot cars are less and less and less. And so now we're getting a lot of 60-foot cars. So we actually had to have a discussion with Procter & Gamble that we couldn't put 6 cars in their spur anymore. We could only put 5, and otherwise they'd be hanging out in like one of their driveways. So they agreed with that, and we had to get together with UP, and they shortened it to 5. And so now we only put 5 cars in there, and the reason being because they don't want their driveway blocked, and we were getting too close to into their track, and
right.
They don't want us getting too close to bumpers and things as we did in the past. Shove over a bumper.
Yeah, but Mike, how does that affect their? I mean, because the car is a different size, the spacing from the door on one car to the door on the next car to the door on the next car must not line up with their loading and unloading bays, right? So
well,
how do they deal with that?
Well, their place, is built to whatever code they used, and their pillars that are there to hold up their awning is I'm just going to say it's 15 feet or 20 feet spacing.
Oh, so there's some slot built in?
Yeah, it's just a big dock, big concrete dock that's probably 6 times 50, 300, 400 feet long. And then they have this giant awning that even goes over the boxcars because they get in paper. They get in raw paper. It's like they call it pulp. But
Yeah.
it looks like a very thick paper towel. Like a paper towel that's maybe like a 1/16 of an inch thick. And they come in these large sheets. And they come from as far away as Brazil. And they get loaded down to New Orleans. And they're just stacks of, I think they're about 4 by 4 feet, and then they're bundled up in 3 feet high stacks, and they're only loaded about halfway in those T-box cars. And so they just grab them with their forklifts, and they only need half a door on. So those T-boxes have the big giant openings. So if you get half the door, they will be able to get in that car because their ramps they're only like whatever they are, 8 feet wide. So they can drive in there, they can start unloading, and then once they get in the car, they can, maneuver around with their forklifts.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's actually an open dock, though.
It is an open dock. Yeah.
It's not doors into a building, but a big open dock.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of places like to get away from the actual doors themselves because that means you gotta, in that case, like what you're saying, and then you'd have to like stop, exactly center it, and then cut away, tie a handbrake on that car, pull to the next one, pull to the next one. If they could be made for 40-foot cars. Now you got 60-foot cars.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's what I mean. Like they'd have to remodel the whole place to accommodate whatever new size car they're doing. So yeah.
Right. Like the IP factory, International Paper, they have just one long dock with no pillars. It is completely out in the elements. So that's a whole genre in building itself too. And then you have like oil refineries and things like that. They definitely want products in certain places. There was a place called Shell Chemical down here in Long Beach. They're still around, and they had certain chemicals go on certain spots, and they had like 10, 12 tracks, and they wanted their fuel additives on this track and whatever on this track and whatever on this track, and boy, that place could take you 3 hours to switch out. I saw a question there, but I didn't catch it. Went away too quick.
That was more of a comment that someone had posted when we were talking about the fact of what scales down and what doesn't scale down. And
so actually, I am kind of curious about this too. Do you use momentum on your layout?
Well, yeah, I on this last operating session, I used only scale trains locomotives, and they have a lot of momentum. So, and some of the people were struggling a bit with them, but you have to definitely back off quick. And just like on ours, you can't just shove into a track at 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour and expect to stop instantly. That's for sure. Yeah. And a lot of times we have a handle of cars. We have to bring our whole train in there. So we have up to sometimes spotting Procter & Gamble. That's our first spot. We had, like a whole 18 cars and, 2,000, 2,500 tons, and you're going against a bumper. So you have to, our engineer's really good. He puts a big set of air in and then shoves it down. And then every so often somebody will go, I need to go 5 more feet. And he'll go, damn it, shh. Then you can't shove it anymore. And our, the engineers, they can't see, around the curve and, down in there. He's like, a quarter mile away.
Well, as long as they have batteries in their radios.
Yeah. Well, and then you have we're off the main line. So you have, the dispatchers talking to the Amtrak trains going by, and then the Amtrak trains are saying, flashing yellow signals and that kind of stuff. And, generally we stay on the road channel because the dispatcher might call, you guys going to be ready to go after this one goes by? Yeah, we're ready to go. And we actually call our dispatcher the fourth man because this guy really has a lot of faith in us, and he knows that we will never, hang him out. We'll be in a sighting in the clear, and we know the schedule by heart. And we meet usually we intertwine with about 7 passenger trains in the time that we're out on the main line.
I remember seeing a bunch of Metrolink go by when I was down there doing that Simi Valley video.
Right.
We had the Coast Starlight and a bunch of Surfliners and Metrolinks going through. I could see that the first half of the day. Yeah, there were like 8 or 10 trains that went through all together. Those are the same ones probably that you see.
Yeah, well, we go to work at 6 a.m. and then if we're really fast or have our cars already ready to go from the day before, we're ready to leave right after that first Metrolink leaves. Well, the first Metrolink we see after we're on duty leaves at 6:12, and then the next one's not till 7:12, so we can make it out to Procter & Gamble, shoot in the clear at Procter & Gamble, and then we're back up to the main line at 7 o'clock, 7:10, and then we're ready to go right behind him to Camarillo. Then we have an Amtrak train, same direction, southbound at 7:55, and then one right behind that he comes in another northbound at 8:40. So we're shooting around it, coming back, trying to get back to Oxnard and trying to do some other work. If we can't do that work, we'll get in the clear and wait for him to go by.
It's a real dance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Do you ever have switching jobs that require you to have your engine on the main while you're switching the siding?
Oh, industries?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We have, well, one Well, they're all off the main, but actually 3 of them, we actually do 4 industries on a regular basis, and actually 5, and so you can't always clear in the industry either.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, because some of them aren't signaled. That's a whole nother aspect of it. But our international paper place, we cannot clear up there. It's a long spur. It's like about a half-mile long, but we cannot clear up there because they do not have a signal, because it's against the rules to clear up in a non-signaled territory or a lockbox. That's getting into a whole new thing. But
so you hold that block while you're switching that industry?
We hold the main line because the southbound Amtrak heads into siding at that point. There's a siding there, and he doesn't they don't use the main line. Of course, we know that, and the dispatcher, of course, knows that. So that gives us about an hour and a half to do all that work.
Oh, so they're actually taking the siding so that you can not break the rules.
Well, no,
right?
they have a station stop there, and the siding is where they load the southbound trains. The northbound trains run on the main. The southbound trains unload on the siding or load.
Oh, so it's just convenient. They actually have to take the siding anyway.
Yeah, they do it. That's the way their operation works on a regular basis. Yeah, sometimes we'll get our dispatcher will be off. They use him. He's like a super dispatcher, so they use him on like the Tehachapi if somebody's over there and they need somebody good, and then we'll get somebody, and they're not always. They go, yeah, well, train 770 takes the siding there, and he goes, oh, okay, so okay, we're good then on that. And there is one of our industries that they will run a train around the siding because the siding's a 35-mile-per-hour siding, so they can just shoot around us, and it doesn't slow them down that much. The Amtrak trains. But that's a dispatcher thing. And
I have a question about doing the local job, and it may not apply to your particular job, but do you have any facing point stuff when you go out to your industries? And if you do you prefer to work those on the way back so that they're trailing point?
Actually, all of our south industries, we are not facing point. But yeah, then you'd have to go another siding and run around if that happened. I mean, there's plenty of places where that does happen. In the old days, you would make the Dutch drop, flying switch, whatever. But that's strictly verbatim now, and so that is why a lot of places have these little sidings. In fact, our one lumberyard, there was a little siding there. It's in a place called Somis, and they had a short 3,000-foot siding there. But they had, that's right, one of the old industries that was there was the other direction. So you would actually need to do that.
So they have
a runaround.
They had to run around. Yeah. That's cool. Was 3,000 feet enough though? I mean, that in today's
for the runaround for a local, that's a lot of room, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long?
The most locals are running.
How long is the flying drop off?
Sorry, we're getting a little lag on the stream here. I'm not sure if it's on your end or ours, but what's the question, Murf?
How long has it been since the flying drop off hasn't been allowed?
Probably, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so. Okay. There's also places where you can do what they call a gravity drop, where the cars will roll on their own. So if it's it's on a hill, and then you can just strictly cut the car off. Your engine could be down in here, and then line the switch and let the car roll in, and then just tie a handbrake on it. Then the engine would come out, and then shove it to the exact spot where it's necessary. Cool. Yeah, that's something the FRA doesn't really like. But yeah, in the old days, places were doing that constantly. But there was a lot of accidents that way too. I can tell you right now. I mean, people would put, every engineer could tell you a story about that somebody put them into a spur that only held like 4 cars, and they went like right through the gate because they couldn't stop the engine or whatever.
Here's a question.
I see that.
I want to mention that too, because this is something that sometimes I find myself doing at op sessions, which is ending up with a piece of train on the front of the engine and a piece of train on the back of the engine or engines. Does that ever happen in real life?
Yeah, we do. We do that too. We have an interchange with another railroad, and if we have only a few cars to go south, we will run around their cars and then have cars on both ends, shove out northward, and then spot the interchange track, and then just come back out and take off the other direction. So yeah, that's definitely that would be a sign of somebody that knew what they were doing, and
Oh, good. So the next time I'm doing that and someone comes over and looks at me twice, I'll say, "What? I know what I'm doing, man."
Exactly.
Because there are times when it just makes sense to do that. I never thought, does this really happen in real life?
Right.
I just kind of did it because it made sense, and it's actually a big relief to find out that you do that in real life, because now I feel vindicated.
Yeah, and I know I've heard people like we did a question and answer at the 2000 whatever it was Sacramento convention. Me and my friend Dave Bayless, and somebody was asking, like, we were talking about like remote units, like, oh, why wouldn't they just shove the train with the remote units? Well, that requires the engineer to get off the road power, somehow get back a mile back, then get on the remote power and shove it's just time consuming. Is something that they wouldn't consider doing. Now, in the old days, they had an engineer on all the different power. Like I remember the Kaiser steel plant, I was telling somebody about this. They would have the ore train, it would go up, the head end would pull in, and then they would cut the helper off. Then the helper could pull the second half in, and then the swing helper, a third helper, could pull the rear end of the train off, and then all the engines would get together, and then they would all go down another track and go back to West Colton to be serviced, or just some track at that industry where they could leave them for the night job to go the other direction again. So there's a lot of things. That's why, these old videos are kind of neat that you see. Charlie Smiley Productions, they have a lot of stuff that's happening, from the 50s and stuff. Another thing I want to mention really quick, it's kind of a thing. If you're modeling steam era or up to the time when cabooses left, so if you're pulling into a siding, the rules were back then that as soon as you stopped in a siding, the rear brakeman on the train was required to start walking up the train and to inspect the train, because there wasn't all these hot box detectors and things out there like there are now. And in fact, every brakeman on the train had to walk up the train. And in the real old days, when they had a brakeman for every 20 cars, they would inspect their 20 cars, then walk back. And so the idea was, like, if you were on like Tehachapi, the engineers would just creep into the sidings. So there's nothing better to me, like I would like to see on a layout, is guys just creeping into sidings, then the train coming the other direction is creeping, and they both never stop. Not just run to the other end of the siding and stop, like you're talking about slowing down the operation. But that is really neat, just to come in real slow. And another thing is, if you had it underpowered, you might have trouble starting the train up again.
Yeah,
that was another reason. As long as you're moving, you can keep it moving.
After you mentioned that the last time you were on, I actually finally ended up doing a remote op of a train at our last session. I usually dispatch. And I remembered what you'd said. And I went into Silicon Siding, and I started coming up on the turnout, and I'm like, no, slow down. I'm OSing the dispatch, who was another person, and they're like, you can go. And I just throttled up, and I was like, oh, that felt good.
And not to mention, like a lot of times, like going up to Bakersfield on this line right here by my house, a mile from me, the switches were all hand throw switches. So the engineer would slow down real slow, and like me, I was pretty young at the time. You run ahead, unlock the switch, throw the switch, and they'd be right there, and then jump back on. And then the same thing with the caboose. The rear brakeman would jump off, and then run back to the caboose and jump on, and then line the switch back for the main line and get in the clear. And those kind of things, I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. But when you have there's a ton of people out there modeling steam air, and that kind of stuff was happening constantly. They didn't just charge into a siding and stop as quick as they could.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of operators seem to be more focused on each individual part of a task. Like, oh, I have to take the siding. So what that means to these guys, a lot of guys, is that means you have to get to the other end of the siding and make sure everything's thrown for the other train to go through, instead of thinking about, how would this have actually happened?
Right.
And one of the things that I've done, I guess, more recently as an operator, because, Mike, Sydney and I go operating as often as possible as everywhere that we can, which is another reason why it was so heartbreaking to miss SoCal Ops this time. But, and I've decided at some point in the past, I don't know, year or two, because I was that guy. I'm like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that. And I'm breaking it up into tasks. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. This isn't how somebody would actually do this. They wouldn't go 50 miles an hour to the siding and just stop and wait there. They would go whatever the actual speed limit is to get there safely, slow down to take the siding generally, because, you're not going to do track speed on most turnouts, right?
Right.
And, slow down to get into the siding. I might even stop the train to simulate the guy getting out to throw the switch if it's a hand throw area, not a dispatch area.
Well, you would 90% of the time, you would have to stop,
right?
And then line the switch, lock it up, and then on the other hand, too, if you were on the main line and the other guy was, like say by trainer was going to take the siding, so the main line train would have to stop. You're supposed to stop 400 feet back from the signal if there's a signal, but you got to stop back from the fouling point. We all know that it's 200 to 300 feet minimum for most of those big switches, and then they would walk up there and line the other train into the siding to expedite the move, and then the head brakeman would stay up there and then line the switch back so they could take off.
Sure, and
things like that.
We'll do things like that as a courtesy, like for our other operators. Like, okay, you're all lined to go through, so just come on through, whatever. But my point is to not think I have to get this done, but think I'm role playing this job. You're a role player. You're not obviously doing work for a real railroad, but for me, it's also not about getting done anymore. I was always about, I got to finish. And sometime in the past year or so, there was an op session, and when it's over, the guy's just, okay, I'm turning the power off. And I was really distraught. I was stressed out because I was not done with my job. And I'm like, no, I need to get this train back. I can't just leave it here. That's thinking, but him shutting the layout off is like going dead on the clock, right? So you don't have a choice, right?
If you get an extra crew, people that don't know the work on a job, they could spend a lot of time. And of course, like the dispatcher is not going to trust them. Just go, yeah, well, we'll get this guy by you and then we'll let you out again, where he wouldn't. And, that happens a lot. I mean, I've had guys, come out on our job when somebody's off and they go, wow, you guys really know what you're doing. It would have took me 10 hours to do this. But that comes with the territory. You know what way the industries are facing. You work this every day. You know what the customers want. You even have a lot of times we end up calling the customers and actually talk to them. Like the other day, we came up to Procter and Gamble, and we're in a kind of a hurry, and they had the flag up with the blue flag to prevent us from going against their cars when they're still unloading them, and they had forgotten to remove it. So we ended up calling up the guy that's kind of our liaison and going, "Hey, Rob, they forgot the flag," and he goes, "I'll get a hold of those guys right now." And 5 minutes later, the guy comes running out of the building and took the flag off so we could do their switch. Otherwise, and as far as Union Pacific is concerned, they have their little device, take a picture of the flag and leave, and then they would get charged. They would get charged for that day's cars that didn't arrive, and because they're supposed to have it ready to go.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line by a certain time. So those type of things too, and
well, they're lucky to have you on the job, making sure they get their stuff right. I mean, that's
oftentimes, but we try never to be off all at the same time. At least one of us is there, just for that reason, because we know it'll be double the work the next day. That somebody didn't do something, and like we have come to. There was a couple months ago, both of us were off for some reason, and they spotted the Procter and Gamble, one of the Procter and Gamble cars at the international paper, and vice versa. And so then that meant we had to switch out that particular car, take it to the other place, and then get the other car, and bring it to the other place. And geez, that's just that's a lot of extra time in our day. A lot of extra time.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like for any job, you're off for any amount of time, and at least half of your first day back is cleaning up whatever mess the person who filled in, did. So, welcome to working anywhere.
Or unless you get in the thing, or somebody is better than you, then you go, oh my gosh, now I might have
Yeah, like, hey, yeah, Mike, Joe filled in for you, and this other crew got that job you guys do done in half the time. Are you like holding out on us? You can do more work.
Right, exactly.
Hey,
do you want to start on the pictures for fun right now? And
let's bring it up, man. Just let me know when you want me to
forward. And just a little thing for the viewers out there. This is my Anheuser-Busch facility.
Yeah, I know it well.
And it switched 2 times during the 6-hour operating session. So it took the average operator about 2.5 hours to finish this. And it holds 6, 5, 11, 15 cars, and the storage yard holds 40 cars, which is 2 switches. So that's the way I designed it. It's very, very similar to the real facility. Okay, hit the next slide. That's just the model itself. Another picture of the large buildings. Those are all flats. They stick out a little bit, but nothing. It's also in a corner. But
the interesting thing about it, Mike, and I'm sure you must realize this, is for the operator, is that if you look over to the right side there, about from halfway across the screen over to the right, if I'm looking at this correctly, isn't that where that's where the tracks go back into the wall, isn't it?
They actually go into the backdrop and go underneath another part of the layout.
Yeah.
That allowed me to have all this room extra. It's, you've read countless articles, guys come up with all kinds of cool ideas, and that was sort of an idea that we came up with when we designed it and over the period of time. But so you don't see the end of the spot, and the people will be required to just shove the cars in the outside. If you look right, that dark brown building, you can see a boxcar hanging out of it. So that car is all the way against the bumper. That track holds 5 cars. So they're just shoving, and we actually did that. We shoved right against the bumper in this industry. And
I thought it was an interesting challenge, because in order to see what's in there, you got to pull it out.
Right.
So that was
right. And vice versa, like as Murf mentioned. So you either have to walk back in there, along the cars, which often there's only a couple feet of room. And of course, you have a list of the cars, but so there's an idea for time taken, but you'd have to actually pull them out. You don't have the the drone view or the helicopter view.
Right.
Okay, go ahead and go to the next one. And there's just
I got to mention real quick that this is another. I think I don't know if you did it on purpose this way, Mike, but if you didn't, it's a great idea for anybody who's thinking about doing an ops-based layout who wants to slow down the operators. Have things like this where people do have to look, like you have to couple to that entire cut and pull it out to find out, where the car you need is in the cut of 5 cars that are hidden by the building. So
right,
I think it's a really clever idea to slowing people down if that's your goal.
And then the storage tracks, one holds 12 cars, the other 3 tracks hold 9 cars each. And I do have car cards, so you can look through the car cards, and as long as everybody put them back in the right order,
right? Like if Bill didn't take them,
yeah, or somebody takes them. But just like in the prototype too, this for that matter, if somebody doesn't give an accurate list, now all of a sudden you're looking for cars that aren't there, and then that really slows you down on the prototype. And this is exactly very, very similar to the real Anheuser-Busch facility. And I also, over the past 5 years, I've bought the same box cars. Now this Anheuser-Busch, they use the same type of box car because they're loading. They had it right down to how much cardboard between the loads. So now it makes it even more difficult because you don't have a Conrail car in there you're looking for. Now they're all brown. They all look the same. So if you need a specific car, you have to really look for that car.
No. Sorry. Can't.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, it sounded like Murf had a question. It was unmuted.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. Go to, I think the next one's a prototype shot.
Okay. Let me see. How do I do this?
Okay, that's taken from the silos. One day we had to wait for them to finish unloading some cars. This is in the grain side of where they unload grain. And now they want those cars in a specific order. They only, in this upper part of it, the tracks hold 8 cars each, or 2 tracks. And they use rice in these upper areas. They use rice at Anheuser-Busch to make sugar for their beer, to sweeten it up. Now they don't use corn sweeteners. So, but consequently, they want their rice up here and the different kinds of grain in the lower part. So and you can see that looks like a model locomotive down there.
They also do use wheat, right?
What's that?
They also use wheat, right?
Well, it's different kinds of. They call it malt, actually. They call it 6-row malt and 2-row malt, and at times they would have 60 cars in our yard just to spot the grain. The grain this place, when it was going full bore, they got 3 boxcar switches a day and the grain side 2 times a day. So they were pulling like 40 boxcars out and 16 grain cars out in a 24-hour period. And those are like GP40s down there you're seeing from a couple hundred feet high. So it looks like a model. And so go ahead. Yeah, there is 50-foot grain hoppers there and locomotives. One of the employees get to know us really well, and so they let us. They gave us kind of a tour while we were waiting. Yeah, we wanted to finish it was like going to take like a half hour to finish the last grain car, so we just said, "Oh, go ahead. We'll just wait around," and they let us go inside. This place is right next to the 405 freeway. If you're ever in Los Angeles, it's in the Valley, the Van Nuys, California, and the whole facility is probably close to a mile, maybe I'll just say 3/4 mile by a half mile, and you can find it on Google Earth. Just look for Roscoe Avenue and find the 405 freeway.
Well, I was going to say too, Mike, that if they're on 405, they'll have plenty of time to look at it because there's traffic.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever I go somewhere I have to go by here. I always look down at the storage yard and go, oh, let's see what's in there. You know, 'cause you can see from there, even if you're going by at 90, you can still see the storage yard. The
Yeah, I
storage
live in
yard will be at the
Costa
top of the
Mesa.
picture next to the main line. The coast main line is up. This is off of the coast main line.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
And that's our engineer. You can see the Bud Light sign and these. It's all refrigerated. There's just fermentation tanks inside there, not to mention all the vats. So they make the beer, then they put it in the fermentation tanks. What we understand, they've told us in the past, it takes 29 days to make Budweiser. So it ferments for 29 days, and then they can it, and then they ship it. So I've modeled all these pipes, you know, not exactly, but just a facsimile of different things. I think it looks kind of neat. You can get an idea how big this place is. All right, let's go ahead. Okay, now this is my actual switch list, and this was sort of designed off the real Budweiser list. What they would do is they would have one of their employees in the old days, or now with faxes, they would fax a list for the work that we would have to do. So we knew exactly what they wanted ahead of time.
So they actually write your switch list for you?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now you'd have to find the cars. If they wanted specific cars, you'd have to go find out where they're in the yard. But they would write the switch list the way they want it, because they wanted cars on specific spots and what cars they wanted to load or unload for that matter.
You know, that's interesting. I'd never really thought about that before, but they would know, as the customer, they would not only know what's in the car, but they'd have the reporting mark of the car as well. But I never thought about
that. They know ahead of time, you know, how many empty box cars they had. You know, of course, they had clean 50-foot box cars. They had to be cleaned by another company. Well, the railroad cleaned them originally, and then they went to another company, but they would wash them inside and sweep them out, get rid of all the debris. And, you know, because beer is a food product. And so it had to be clean. And they don't want to open up a box car and find a bunch of wood in there, and then they'd have to throw that wood away. They would just reject the car. But so this is what I'm doing. And as I have the operation session, I have the person doing the operating start the new list for me, or they would actually write down the car numbers as they put them in there, so that the staging was pre-done.
Right. So the next guy comes in and he sees those are the cars that need to be pulled, right?
Well,
theoretically,
the cars they put in there now are on a blank sheet, and all I have to do really is build them out, you know, put new destinations for them. So I don't know how good people are looking at this on their computers or whatever.
It's kind of hard to see.
But over to the right, I have needed. So those are cars that they need a specific car in a specific spot. Otherwise, I just have like the RBL. So you can use any RBL on those spots, just to make it really quick. But there's an old article done about 15 years ago in LD SIG or the Layout Design SIG that where I go into more detail if you can find it. But this is just, a lot of companies do this. They'll fax lists to the railroad. I mean, there were at this place alone, there was 4 different customers that would fax list in, including General Motors. So they would all, you know, they would send you a list. I have a picture later on in here of the actual list of what they do, but go ahead and flip it. This is just some instructions, you know, on doing the thing. I think people that do a large industry like this, a lot of operators told me, you know, they wanted specific instructions. So, you know, I did notice that most people didn't read, but, you know, this is 21 different instructions. That's not uncommon for an industry this big. We had like a 4-page, they called it the equalizer, and it was like a 4-page computer generated thing of how to do this. You know, what you do this on here, you do this here, be careful of this. You know.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When I operated on your layout 2 years ago, I do not remember seeing this instructions.
That's because I started this time.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah,
Hey.
I think Jim Radke said I needed more instructions.
Oh, it was Jim, because I know I told you that, but you don't listen to me.
No, I don't listen to you. Yeah, I listen to Jim because he's big. He was a Marine. He's big.
Right? He'll kick your ass if you don't do what he says.
Yeah, Semper Fi. I listen to Marines.
Yeah, Jim's the last guy that would kick your ass, but I understand.
I know, he's the nicest guy in the world.
He is.
Yeah.
Okay, flip to the next one. Okay, now this is from 1983. You can see that 7/2/83, right before the 4th of July, and they have on there what they want. This is something that they delivered to the railroad, and if you look carefully at it, they have like TOLD means take out load, TOX is take out empty. Notice the very top to the right, it says LV. That means leave. A lot of guys on my layout go, what does LV mean? And I go, it means leave the car. Don't even touch it. So they don't even want those cars touched at all. And that's oftentimes, industries do that. And at the very bottom, you can see they put on there, 2 cars here, 150-foot RBL to 6239, 4 to this track, 4 to this track. So from the very get-go, from that list immediately that you need 4, 8, 9 50-foot cars and 2 50-foot reefers that day. So you could find those in our yard. You could use any ones you wanted that were ready to go and empty and cleaned, and then spot them at the industry. But this is how I came to my little list that I have, and I have that one of those for General Motors and one of those for Budweiser. But this is a good 2.5, 3 hours for a model railroad operator, and not too many people have done it any faster than that, and they get tired. John has good ideas, just only when someone else has it too.
Right? That's Cameron. Cameron, you can guess what I'm doing right now to that comment.
There was railroad terminology I heard earlier in the broadcast.
Control Alt Delete.
Right.
So this is something, like I said, this is if you look closely at it, it says local conductor, Anheuser-Busch Incorporated, 4 p.m. Saturday, 7/2/83. So, what we're going on here 40 years ago. And, this is kind of all handwritten, you notice, not typed, Yeah,
I like this idea about having the prototype paperwork like this, because it really does show what what your process is when you're coming up with this whole scheme, right? It's very realistic.
Right. And we're oftentimes, dealing with 10 separate pieces of paper. We staple them. Certain guys have things that they staple them on the right so they can see everything. Because if you staple them on the left, sometimes the staples are too far in and you can't look to the left column because that's usually where more important stuff is. And so some guys go, and then you got to carry around in your pocket, put it away when you're hand holding a car. I see people fumbling with paperwork on model railroads all the time, and fold the list in half, put it in your pocket, do your switching, and then pull it out again and look at it. And
having something that fits in your back pocket is a good idea. I've seen guys do that on their layouts too, where they'll have the rule book or whatever, the stuff you need to know, and they put it on a piece of paper that folds in half so you can put it in your pocket. I think that's a great idea.
I think everybody's seen the timetables, and that's why they're made a certain way so it fits into a pocket. And the average 8.5 by 11 piece of paper folds in half, fits nicely into a pocket. And it's funny with the newer paper, it's when it's brand new and you just got your list in the morning, it's real easy to slip out of your pocket because the paper is a lot slicker.
Yeah.
And so in fact, this morning I noticed that I dropped it. It came right in my pocket, right outside the door. And hopefully it's not windy, it'll blow away. But this is something that people can do
They need to use that pulpwood that you deliver to print your instructions.
Yeah, then you never get it out. But I've not really seen this. Everybody's got a throttle in one hand, a piece of paper in the other hand. Oftentimes conductors would also use the list for their hand signals because you could see it better. A piece of white paper is way more visible, than the hand by itself. And so those things are types to consider. We at Gemco, they gave us the back piece of paper. They call them hard tabs. They were like a piece of construction paper that was orange, and they would staple it to keep it keep it from all, starting getting creased inside your pocket. It says, I see the bad orders in red there. They are ordered to be taken out. Yeah, the bad orders in that picture. So you're looking good. That's good that you're looking at that. And I'm going to get a little more into that. So that means TOX, just take them out. We don't even want them. We can't use them.
Is that the one in red? The one
that's what somebody just pointed out. Yeah. Go ahead and flip to the next page because I think that's the letter, and it's definitely small. But this is them complaining to the railroad, and it says in the month of June, I got a big copy here next to me. In the month of June, we loaded 337 SP loads. So that's a substantial industry, right? We rejected 17 SP cars, or 5% of all SP equipment. And then it gave a list of every car, and they put, hole in floor, odor, bulkhead missing, bad floor, outside door, bulkhead missing, outside door. So these were revenue that the railroad lost because the cars weren't good or up to their satisfaction. And, they couldn't open the door right. The bulkheads, for anybody that doesn't know, like these cars they ordered had 2 bulkheads that slid along a track inside the car, so you could push them against the load and secure it and lock in place. Like a beer, if they were like in bottles, they would, they wouldn't want them flying all over the place, so they were like tightly packed. And one other thing I want to mention really quick, everybody that's drank a beer in a bar, a lot of those bottles are returnable, and so they would have empty bottle shipments from their distributors. And so then they would, inside the plant, they would unload these empty bottles. They would request them in a certain track in a certain spot, and then their forklift drivers would unload them. They would put them to the wash. They had some kind of acid treatment that they would get the labels off, wash them out, and then they would refill them. And so that was one of the shipments they got in from their distributors. And they would even recycle the cardboard, their cardboard packaging. They had like thick pieces of like cardboard that were like 4x8 sheets that were like 1 inch thick, and they would stick between the loads so that everything fit in this particular cars. That they had that down to a science. There was 12 pieces of cardboard in there to keep the beer clean. Now also Budweiser only loaded 2 pallets high because they determined that if they loaded a 3rd pallet, it would crush the pallet down below. So they don't want their product in the store, with a creased box, because anybody who's ever been in a store who wants the creased box one, right?
Unless that's the last one. Yeah, the last one to go. That's when you're really desperate, right? You're really desperate. Right. You walk in the store on a Friday night, it's the only one left.
Yeah, and then guess what? John bought it. And John goes, hey, can I have a discount on this? I go, we don't give discounts on beer, pal. And anyways, that's what they did. Some customers loaded the ceiling, but that just creates everybody's concerned about their products, in a store. And of course, this is a food product. It wants to be clean. And as you can, I want to show this really quick, but with the hand signals, here's an orange glove. It's way more visible than my hand by itself.
Let me make this go away. We don't need that anymore, do we?
No.
Yeah, make sure all of your fingers are extended. This is a family show. No, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah. A lot of times you'll see a glove on a switch like this. Somebody will stick an old glove, just like this.
Right.
But they didn't have these like when I hired out, but they, nobody had gloves that were like, nice like these ones.
You probably can't get away from those now, huh?
Yeah, they have the reflector. Oh, they're nice. They really are.
Yeah.
And also these have the little the mesh so they can breathe for hot areas.
Oh, okay.
And then they have real thick gloves for people that work out in like snow and things. So.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Those are pretty nice gloves. Are those UP standard issue PPE or what?
Yeah. Well, they have they have them in machines, like a vending machine in larger terminals, and then for the outlying terminals, you order from a company like a third-party vendor, and they're like $5 each, but they give you like a budget of like $350, and then you could order like 20 pairs.
Don't you have like some special card that the vending machine takes and
you had to put your employee account number in the
card? There we go.
Yeah. And they had all kinds of neat stuff, in there that you could buy. But so, like it's just human nature, you go, oh, the gloves, I'll make them last. Like I had a pair of gloves. I didn't want to go through the ordering process. So I had a pair of gloves that were probably 2 months old, and they were starting to get ripped on the inside. not my hands weren't exposed, but they're actually warm gloves, because where I work out in the morning is kind of, people are laughing on the East Coast, but it's like 50 degrees, 40 degrees in the morning, and it's wet. The wet coastal climate, it can get kind of cold in the morning.
Hey man, in California, anything under 70 is cold.
Right.
So, right. I'm a California native, so
Yeah, me too, basically. Yeah, my cousins in Michigan, they always go, anything above 32 degrees is shorts weather.
Yeah. That's this guy.
I was telling John today at lunch, I said, since I've gotten old, I said, everything feels cold now. But I spent 7 years in North Dakota after growing up in Michigan. North Dakota made Michigan look like balmy weather. It was regularly negative 30 up there. I coached hockey outside and it'd be 100 below wind chill.
Forget it.
Now it's 50 degrees, and I'm like, I don't know if it's going to go outside and be that cold. So sorry, I get it.
You need a jacket.
Here you're in the winter. The people are growing flowers and everything else. Like in San Jose, it was in April. It was cloudy pretty much the whole time, and
which is actually pretty rare, Mike. It was unusually cold when you were here.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, it was cold down here, for that matter. It was unusually cold spring, I would say.
It was unusually cold and unusually windy when you were here.
Well, even here, which is I'm at 1,400 foot elevation. What is it? It says 80 right now, a low of 55, and so that's basically really comfortable weather. We were in the swimming pool today, for that matter.
Yeah. You want to click up Jason's question there?
Let me see.
Yeah, you got another question? Okay.
Where is it? Which one?
Right there.
This one?
Yeah.
Let's see what this says.
Hey, Mike, was this a daily switch job? Seems that the battlers in groups every few days. Well, not only a daily switch job, an hourly. It was actually switched 3 times a day by 3 different jobs. So they actually had other duties, but they would spend 2 to 3 hours of just doing Budweiser. So they had like a 6 a.m. switch, a 2 p.m. switch, and a 10 p.m. switch. So they would switch that place 3 times a day. And then the 10 p.m. job was also responsible for taking all the beer from the whole day down to downtown Los Angeles, and then that would go on a train called the Phoenix, and they would take it to the east on a hot piggyback train that would go on the head end, right on the head end. And most of the beer that they made, that the railroad shipped, all went to Phoenix and Tempe. Occasional load for Yuma Yeah, but other than that, they trucked it. But the long distance would go to Phoenix and Tempe. There was some very large Anheuser-Busch distributors down there.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like beer would be a high priority commodity. I mean, it's not like it really expires, does it? I mean,
well, as far as Budweiser are concerned, they have, you know, they had dates on them, and they did not want it. I know one of my a guy I know, he actually worked for the company, and they would have like a 20-day thing that they don't want it. Once it was in storage, it's throwaway time. They don't want it getting, you know, weak or whatever, and so they were really careful about their product.
That's interesting because I don't think of Budweiser as like a super high quality, you know, aficionado beer connoisseur type beer, but to hear how serious they are about, you know, freshness or whatever.
Still got to have shelf life standards, or else
you
buy your.
I mean, obviously, if it's in your house, it's one thing, but as far as the store, you know, they didn't want it in too long. And by the way, while I'm thinking about it, is this plant? I think one of the managers there told me once they made 27 different kinds of beer there.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, so they, you know, they have all those beers like Michelob Light, Bud Light, Bud White, Busch, just to name a few. They even made like Colt 45. They made Kirin, that Kirin beer for like the Japanese market. They would ship stuff in containers. They even had a beer. They told me they called it Billy beer, and it was strictly made for the Marine Corps in Okinawa, and it was a high content, alcohol content, and the way they made it was in the vats, they had squeegees, and whatever was left when the vat drained, they would squeegee it up, suck it out, and then it didn't matter what the flavor was, they would just put it can it in this what's called Billy beer, no Budweiser label, and they would all go to the Marines in Okinawa because they loved it because it was super strong. It was like, who knew, the alcohol content varied on every batch. Oh, and not to mention the dark Michelob Dark, you know, the dark beers or whatever. I forgot all about that. But yeah, 27. I think they said they'd have like 27 kinds of beer and like 80 different kinds of packaging, you know.
You had Robert's question.
Sure.
Above.
Go ahead.
Let's see. Up here someplace?
Yeah, right there.
Truck Sputters, this one?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what this one
Hey,
says.
Mike, do you get a Track Spotters book? Oh, of your track? We use them up here. And does he mean the track, the real railroad, or the model railroad? I'm not sure.
I think he's talking about the real prototype.
Oh, yeah, they had these books called Spins, SP Industrial Number System that encompasses a certain area, and they would have all the tracks at the schematic. In fact, if that picture I had one sort of on the bottom, which they were just like schematics to give people an idea what way the tracks faced. And the UP has the same thing. They have it on their computer generated, and you can pull up the whole system if you wanted to, and you can just print them out if you need it necessary for an area.
Yeah, Robert actually works, I think for UP up in the Pacific Northwest. I think for UP. I don't remember. I'm sure if I said that wrong, he'll probably put a comment on here.
Okay.
No, but yeah, he's a prototype railroader as well. So
yeah, well, I worked these jobs for years and years, so you know you just know them by the back of your hand. You don't really need the book anymore. But anybody that comes out there that's extra, they're going to need it, or people that work extra boards and things, you know. I've been fortunate enough to work, you know, regular jobs since the mid 90s or late 80s. And a lot of times, you know, just position myself to work in certain areas.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. That's one of the things that I've noticed operating on different layouts. And it's something I think that model railroad operators, it's a challenge that we face that the prototype generally you don't face that issue of walking into a new layout and having no idea what's what, where it is, or where to go.
Well, yeah, that's a really good point. And, you know, I got to admire people that come over and even want to do this, you know, and, you know, there, it is quite challenging to look over somebody's tracks. And, oftentimes as a prototyper, I'll see stuff on models and I'll go, they would never do that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm thinking about stuff. One of the things that cracks me up, and this is just me, and if you want this on your railroad, that's your business. And if you're having fun,
right,
then so be it. But the old time saver puzzle?
Right.
I've heard discussions and talked to people who are like, oh, I really need to have that on my layout because I want people to have this challenge. It's like no railroad would ever do that. They want to build the simplest, most effective, efficient. Right. The railroads solve problems. They don't create problems, right? They're not trying to make things. What we really want our workers to have fun doing the switching puzzle.
I can only pull out 2 cars out at one time and then have to go in there with 1 car or whatever. I mean, there are places that, the track's out of service and you got to do it that way. But, that
only out of necessity, though,
I was going to say probably out of geography or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And my friend Dave Bayless, when he did a lot of track planning, and like this Budweiser, the yard lead to go to Budweiser is a mile long, so you could literally pull a mile string of cars out of that. Well, they never did, but you had plenty of room. You don't need the main line to switch it. So a complex industry like this one will definitely have a lead off the main line. They're not. You can't spend 2 or 3 hours and block a main line. In a model, the frequency of trains is insane if you're running mainline trains at the same time. Yeah. I have a siding that I have the lead and then it goes into a siding, which will hold all the cars.
Yeah. And I remember on your layout, switching out that brewery, I did not have to go onto the main at all unless I was moving stuff over to the yard. So,
right.
And I don't know if you remember, Mike, but I also didn't have that lovely instruction list that you had. So I was just moving stuff and not really understanding where I would. I mean, now that I've operated more, it makes sense. It would be kind of like a common sense thing. Like, well, of course, you're pulling these cars that are theoretically supposed to be loaded out of the bays and building a train on the track, that's supposed to be taken away by somebody or that you're supposed to take away yourself. But I didn't know that. I'm just moving stuff up. Finally, at lunchtime, I'm like, where am I supposed to put all the cars, man?
And then when you want to get ultra complex about it is, like we will think about how we're going to double over the cars. So if there's Phoenix cars in 37 and Phoenix cars in 38, so you could double those Phoenix cars together and then save yourself a move. We're thinking in those kind of terms. And I also got to figure too, when I'm, I've done this so long, it's also hard for me to sometimes go, okay, why don't people get this or whatever, it's not that complicated, but it is, and if you've done it for a really long time.
I think some of that harkens back to somebody new walks into the layout and they don't quite get those optimizations. And
we had
been there for 5 sessions, 6 sessions, you're going, oh, now I know. I can think ahead.
Right. Yeah. And then, and then you have jobs where people just go, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But like Ray Arnett in his podcast was talking about, he goes, oh yeah, I head for that job the first thing because I like the challenge of it, and so this is a layout he operates on a regular basis. So I thought that was kind of interesting that he said that. I'm picking up information that from other people, like maybe next time John goes, yeah, I really want the Budweiser job. I want to.
Oh, I would absolutely do it again now that I understand what I'm supposed to do, and I'd be good at it too because
and now you've even seen a little bit of the prototype, and you're going, okay, I see what he has, what Mike's created here, and
absolutely. And to your point too, Mike, there's a layout that I've operated on pretty regularly. I'm talking about Dave Lovelace's layout up here in Watsonville, and he has really great jobs. They're fun jobs. I've been operating on it enough times that I think I've done most of the jobs, not like yards or anything like that or dispatching, but just the jobs, the locals and the through trains and all that.
Right.
And I can recall the first time I did a particular job, I was very confusing. So the next time I went, I asked for that same job and I did it again and I did it much better. And if certain little tricks, like, well, there's this one double-ended siding on the other side of the aisle that you can park your incoming traffic while you go do your pulls, for example. And then I build the train where I'm pulling the cars, and I take that whole train over after I'm done building it, and I pull the deliveries, and then spot them. It's a lot easier that way. But I didn't know the first time I went there that I could use that siding and do that. Well,
Right.
now I know. So it's like a trick, that's like knowing, like, how many, cars will fit into a spot at an industry because you've switched it so many times. You have all that information up here, right?
Right. Like we won't take more than 5 cars that industry. And
right.
I don't know if people heard this term, they call it frogging yourself, where you can't make a move then. Things like that, and then the other thing is too, is like, there's always a lot of different ways of doing it, the same industry, and especially when you're getting into the complex part of it. And in fact, this Budweiser place, I was working with a regular conductor, and he actually wasn't the sharpest guy. And one time he went on vacation, and he would actually confuse you on, I think he confused you on purpose to make himself seem smarter. And anyways, he was on vacation for like 3 weeks, and I'm going, like, after like first 2 nights, I'm going, wait a minute, he's not even doing it. He's doing things rather inefficiently. So when he came back to work, I go, no, go to this track first. Oh
right.
Yeah, some guy would really take offense to that, but he didn't, and our local cars always blocked based on industry, or do you have to do that before you leave? Yeah, you would have to do it. They just come into it's like a deck of cards that are mixed up. I saw that in an old video. So it's like a deck of cards that are mixed up, and you got to put them back in the spades, hearts, queens, or diamonds, and then sometimes even put them in the order of, ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's a good way of describing that. And oftentimes, you're not taking all the cars to the industry. You're taking the oldest cars first. The customers want the oldest cars, or they want certain cars. Some customers are willing to pay the extra money to keep cars, longer than necessary. But, at this Budweiser plant, for instance, they'd often have, like, I would say times the most, maybe 140 cars in our yard just going to Budweiser. That's a lot of cars for one industry. But that would be like they were getting out 40 cars a day, almost 45 cars a day. That's like a 3-day supply.
It's interesting. I have a friend that works a local job for a short line, basically. Mm-hmm. And actually UP brings in on whatever their local is, right, that services this yard where they work, will bring in like 60 cars, and they just drop it off on the track. And this local job for the short line, they need like 6 cars, maybe 8. Sometimes if they're really busy, 10. And they got to dig them all out of this huge long cut that's not blocked in any fashion. It's just like they would never have their train all in the same spot. So they're pulling out 50 to get to the one that's buried way at the end, dropping it off, then pulling. And you described this as part of your job in the morning, right? Or in the afternoon, getting ready for the next day, whenever it is. And I think that's something else that people don't really think about. And you have to be very deliberate about what order you put those cars in. Again, depending on your industries, right? Because you don't want to be switching something out and then blocking it while you're switching at the industry. Right. That would take way too much time, right? So.
Oh yeah, like we already know tomorrow we got like 31 cars that are coming in. We sort of already know the order, and I sort of just briefly took a look at it, but so there's 31 cars coming in, and the max amount that we could put tomorrow in all those industries is 12.
Oh boy.
So, and there's 3 different industries that they go to. And so, there will be some switching involved on that. So and a lot of times too, is like people don't realize every single car doesn't have to go to every industry in the same day. Often cars are stored for reasons.
You store them, Mike, on tracks at the yard, like special storage?
Yeah, generally we do. Yeah. Now the other conductor that we had, he liked to take everything out of the yard and store it. The customer has storage capacity of the one big customer of like 12 cars at any given time, but we do things a little differently now, but some customers don't have that option. So you got to take out what you do. And like the short line that we interchange with, like you say, we just shove cars over there. There's autos mixed with lumber, with empty box cars for an industry that makes stuff there. So their cars are mixed up, and that's their problem. We're not going to pre-sort their cars for them. And I do see this on model layouts too. Is a lot of yard masters are actually like switching out the cars in station order. Now they don't do that on like at places like Colton or big yards like Roseville. They see cars going for a specific area, they're putting them all on one track.
Yeah.
They're just like humping them into one track. They're not gonna go, oh, okay, all these are Budweiser. Okay, we better switch this track out another time and get all the Budweiser together and get all the Procter and Gamble. They just don't do it because that's not their job, and it would take forever.
I think it depends, at least on model railroading. I think it depends on the era that people are modeling, because I have worked with people on older era layouts, and they do block it for you in order, so that when you take the train out of the yard, I think I don't know, but I'm suggesting that the theory behind that process is that this would have been done by someone at some point, whether that's you as the person or the crew taking the train out to the main line to deliver all the stuff, or whether it would be a hostler or someone in the yard, working a switching job just in the yard. I think that the way they're running things now might be, well, actually this comment sort of might have some relevance to what I'm talking about. And I don't know I'm not sure exactly what Dave means by this.
Well, I think he wants to know what the precision scale relate to a local. It doesn't mean anything to us, but it's more about running mainline trains than locals.
Well, it might relate to you just in the way of that cut of cars that gets delivered by the long haul train, being delivered to the yard is what you have to break apart, right, to make your own.
Well, it's what basically I'll say I'll give you a really quick synopsis, because I know it's almost 2 hours into this.
Didn't even realize
fun
that.
We've had.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm learning a lot though, so this is all good. I have a whole list of stuff that we haven't even talked about yet that I'll just. Yeah.
All of our cars for our district, which encompasses 100 miles, let's say. So they all come into Colton Yard from various points across the entire United States. So then they're coming in on various trains from Oregon, Louisiana, Texas, Kansas, whatever. So they're humping all the cars for what they call Gemco Yard. So they're going to hump all the Gemcos in one track at Colton. And obviously there's cars for Anaheim, there's cars for Long Beach. So they're sorting those cars out in various tracks. And then the UP and the SP did the same thing. They call hauler trains. So they have a hauler out of Colton, which is about 70 miles from Gemco. And then the crew takes that train and then brings it out to Gemco. They might make a set out en route of some other cars in Los Angeles, but that's the way it works. So they have a Gemco hauler. So they run the 70 miles and they bring the cars to Gemco. Now the job at Gemco further refines them. They will refine them into like all the cars going on the Saugus job, all the cars going to Oxnard, all the cars going to Santa Maria, Guadalupe. They will refine them in tracks and then double them over. Then there's another hauler that runs up the coast. Then they take that train and they'll have an Oxnard set out of say 30 cars tomorrow, and they'll set those Oxnard cars out. They came today, and they will set those Oxnard cars out and continue on their journey. So, and that's and then we have to refine the cars. So we're not obviously can't take. We have like say 15 P&Gs coming in tomorrow, Procter and Gamble's. So we're only going to need 5. So we'll just take the 5. They're all coming at the same time tomorrow. So we have nothing in the yard now. So we'll take only 5.
Right.
So 5 out to them, and then the next day we'll take 5 more, or how many ever. They might only unload 3 of them. Sometimes they unload all of them. Sometimes they load 3. Sometimes they load 2. It all depends on them.
Right.
So that's the way in a synopsis it works. And the UP is no difference from the SP, the Rio Grande. They all seem to work the same.
The important things that stuff gets to where it's going in an appropriate amount of time, and they get paid.
Right, and they have it all scheduled out. The customers, can go on the UP computer and they know, approximately when they're going to get their cars. They can trace every car. They can order cars in if they like, however they want to do it. And then the same thing with the empties. So we're not like going, I don't know. Maybe they're doing this in other places. I don't know. But we're not like going, we have to separate the Portland, Oregon cars from the Louisiana cars at our yard. Because we just put them all on one track. They take them they reverse the process.
Oh, okay. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Our co-host is having to take off. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they reverse the process. So all the empty cars go certain, or whatever we have. We don't have a lot of outbound. Well, we do have outbound loans of automobiles. Now those will be blocked. The autos will be blocked.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But they're all going to the same location. They're all going to Texas, where the distribution center is.
Yeah, that does make sense that they'd want to have specific types like that.
Because they don't want the auto sitting around to be vandalized or stolen or whatever. They just rather have the autos leave. And then we do get outbound loads of like frozen strawberries and things, and those are semi-hot cars because they have running refrigeration cars type of thing.
Yeah,
but
I'm being corrected in the chat because I used the wrong word. They're talking about hostlers using or only hostling motive power. Right, I get it.
Hostlers only hostile.
Right.
Hostile motive
although
power
actually
around.
Robert called them holsters, so they should be carrying guns around.
Yeah, holsters only hostile power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, a really funny story is one day we were waiting. We were waiting at they call it 9th Street Junction in downtown Los Angeles, and some light power that the hostlers were running up to the piggyback terminal in LA, downtown LA. They had 5 units, and on the rear unit there was a blue flag, which meant don't move this power. and we get on the radio and we go, hey, calling the hostlers on the whatever power. You go, you might want to check your rear unit. And about 5 minutes later, we get a call back on the radio. Go, oh, thanks. Because
did you see the train go back to drop it back off?
They probably just threw it in the dirt because that would be like a fireable offense that the mechanical department. They probably just forgot. It wasn't like some mechanical guy was working underneath it, but that was the whole point of it.
Yeah, good thing no one was working underneath it when they moved.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to pull up in front of the intermodal terminal with a blue flag on their rear unit.
Yeah,
and have somebody start questioning that.
Yeah, that could be a very uncomfortable situation.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want it happening to me. But yeah, switchmen, switching yards. We're what they call a road switcher. Our job is considered a road switcher.
Yeah.
And when I hired out, you would have had 2 brakemen and a conductor and an engineer on that job. And now we have 1 brakeman, 1 conductor, an engineer.
Yeah.
So they just and we had clerical people back then. We are basically the clerical people now. We have to keep our inventory straight of our cars. Some guys don't. But we do, because we want to be able to find our cars quickly. It's all about our efficiency. And
Oh,
then,
sure.
Yeah. In LA, a lot of things are happening really quick. And
even the railroading is, huh?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think people probably don't know, but in LA they have a thing where you pretty much get paid the same amount every day, and so you're on what they call a flat rate. So they want people to get things done and get them over with. They can't have people just taking the longest time to do anything. They want things efficiently, and it was an SP thing, and the Rio Grande liked that, and now the UP has kept it, because their guys were just trying to get 12 hours, making the most of the money. It was taking them 2 or 3 crews to move one train across Los Angeles, and they were realizing that SP was doing it with 1 crew, instead of 3 crews, to get a coal train over the road, because people were trying to make as much money as they could.
Well,
And
I guess that's one way. One way to incentivize efficiency, right, on the cruise part, by having them be flat rate.
Right. LA's like, even now in 2024, I'm just going to ballpark it and say there are probably 30 yard jobs at West Colton. And there's probably in the LA basin, that's inclusive of Colton, our area, the whole Los Angeles basin, Long Beach, probably 40 road switchers. So that's a lot of locals. And you can't have everybody just dogging it all day long, because a lot of this, like the jobs that build these intermodal trains, they want them out quick, and everybody knows their job, and moves. You always hear stories about things getting messed up, but things do get messed up. But
yeah,
it's about efficiency, and it's like an airport. If you have 5 flights a day, it's not a big deal if somebody is 15 minutes late or 30 minutes late. But when you have, like, at a place like LAX or San Francisco Airport, you got to have everybody on the ball constantly, and moving things. Get this plane out, That he needs that gate to park here. It's the same thing. They need that yard track. You can't be fouled up with cars. They need all this spacing.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I think about, at least on the model railroads that I operate on, there's a lot. That's something that model railroads do that real railroads don't do as much, which is cramming a lot more operations into a smaller area. Like one of the railroads that I operate on a regular basis, model railroads, has way more trains than you'd ever see in a day, right, on this. And so it's made to be more fun, and it gives people more jobs to do, and it's good that way. But I think that model railroad operators need to step back and kind of go, wait a minute, this is not accurate. This is not really prototypical. So the whole thing, I don't know. I guess the whole thing is really a game that we play, and it's fun.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
I even, when people ever ask me that don't know anything about model railroading, and they see my layout and they see the car cards, and they always go, well, what are those for? And I always go, it's just sort of like a game.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, I kind of get it. Yeah. It's a game. And one other thing I'm going to mention about my layout too is that I've built the bottom levels at like 50 inches, and I'm sure John noticed this. So you're looking at the cars more or less on an eye level, like I do out in the prototype. You're not looking the helicopter view, and that also makes it more challenging, because you can't see the cars behind another track. You have to either pull them out or look at the car cards and decide what cards you need to do. But that's just something that I've done, and I see people in videos that do the same thing, and people are getting more. You don't have to stoop over either, for that matter. And then if you're real short, you have to get a stool.
Yep, we know someone like that.
Yeah.
Even with regular layouts that are helicopter view, she still needs to stand up on something. She's in the other room highlighting some of the comments from time to time.
And what a nice person. What a nice person.
Oh, stop kissing. Oh, never mind.
Yeah. It was it was really nice to meet Sydney and you. Well, I met you before, but
I know. Sorry about that.
Talk and have lunch, and and everything else.
Yeah, that was a real highlight when you were up here for that. For that PCR convention, we had a lot of fun, and it was good to hang out.
Yeah, I can't wait when I retire. The PCR is a great group, and I don't think people should poo-poo those things that they are a lot of fun, and you learn so much from other people.
Oh, sure.
And it's a camaraderie, and things you never even thought of. And even me, I learned things from other people. They have they had a clinic on getting all your cars and their couplers the right things, and little things that I never even thought of. And but you glean these things from the things. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want, be a lone wolf, but it's fun to see. There was a guy there that had the Blue Nami that he makes, manufacturers, and he's an interesting guy to talk to, and see it actually in operation, and describe it. People really need to go to these things. They're fun.
Well, we're really lucky. I may have talked about this a little bit with you when you were here. I don't remember, but we have probably, I don't know because I haven't been in other divisions in other regions, but I can say, just based on my experience in our division, that it must be one of the better divisions in the NMRA.
So. I agree.
I mean,
yeah,
the NMRA is a pretty big organization, and people always say that where everything really happens is at the division level. And they're talking about if you have a good division superintendent like we do. Phil is very active. He's very passionate about what he's doing. He does a lot of work to try to get out there and be in the public eye and get membership and just outreach,
Yeah.
And he thinks outside the box when it comes to other stuff. How can we do this? How can we make things better for members? That's something that's always on his mind. I've had a lot of conversations with him about, what we call the value proposition of membership. Because, well, I'm not going to get into that because it's a whole, that would be a whole,
talk about another show.
Yeah, that would be a whole topic on its own. Like, what's the NMRA good for, or how to maximize, or why to join, that kind of thing, or why not to.
I met some old SP employees, and they had their stories to share, and then some old friends like Dave Bayless, who's been an old friend I've known him since I was 14 years old. I mean, you're talking now close to 50 years.
That's a long time friendship.
But he doesn't live near me anymore. But we had a great conversation, and and then then you might meet somebody and talk about something completely different other than railroads.
Well, I mean, for me, it almost always is. As a matter of fact, we have actually two groups of people, and there's some crossover between the two groups where they'll have lunch like on Tuesday, and they'll have lunch like on Friday. So Tuesday and Friday. And the Tuesday one we call Taco Tuesday. Murf is actually part of the Taco Tuesday group. Murf is actually part of the Friday one, which we call the DCC lunch. And the funny thing about it is we get together to have lunch, and a lot of the time, no one even talks about train anything. It's a social event more than anything else.
Right.
So, and really the NMRA meets, the divisional meets and regional meets and convention are the same thing. It's getting together with your friends and catching up,
Well, people that have a like interest. They have a like interest. We're all interested in model railroading, and there's so many niches within that whole thing too. I mean, people are into logging, people are into modern stuff, people are into steam, people are into diesels, people are into moving cars, people are into ops, people are into signals. It's just this. People are into 3D printing. You guys are real techie up there. And,
I don't know about that. I mean, everybody has a 3D set of foamers in their division, I think.
Well, yeah. Now it's because as I listen, I realize that people are really into that.
Yeah. It's definitely getting to be more mainstream. There's no question about that. And the cost of the printers is coming down a bit. So.
Yeah, like I told, I'll probably never do this, but I could really appreciate it. It was fun to learn about it.
Yep.
And at the convention, they were printing a structure right in front of your face.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know how long did it take to print it, like 24 hours or 48 hours. That was Phil, right?
Right. I think it was. And I wasn't following the progress on it, but I did see that 3D printer in that room where they had all the other displays. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we're talking about like a large HO scale warehouse that, just Z, you come back 3 hours later is an inch higher and there's a little partition wall or something.
It's like watching grass grow.
Right. You run up to your room, take a nap or, go out to eat and come back and what happened now? Oh, there's a doorway. Oh, how neat.
Right. So I want to mention something I brought when we were eating lunch today. Every time Murf comes down to do this, we'll go have lunch at this great Italian place, which sometime when you're up here, Mike, we'll go to it also. It's one of my favorite places. Yeah. And I made some notes of some ideas I had about, things that people could do on their layouts to try to be more prototypical or try to create an environment where people can operate more prototypically. And I thought since I made this list, it's only about 7 or 8 things. I'd like to share them with you. And unless you have to go, I mean, I realize we're past our 2 hours here, but I don't want to get in an argument with your agent or anything. So
but that's
tell you what, we'll double your paycheck if you'll hang out with me for these last few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really a lot of. You're good with math. I'm sure you can figure it out.
Right.
So what I had listed, and some of the stuff I actually borrowed from you because we talked about this before, and one of them was operators doing realistic speeds. That's something that's prototypical, I think, because I often have been trying to operate somewhere and someone comes right up behind me and they're like, hey, you got to speed it up, man. I'm like, I don't think so. I'm doing about 30 or 40 scale miles an hour. And what you need to do is you need to calm down and slow down because you're the one that's stressing out here, not me. Kind of. Right? I kind of brought this one up earlier, which was slowing down for turnouts and,
absolutely.
Branch line, right?
Absolutely.
Branch lines, there's always a slower speed limit on a branch line, or almost always, because then you're into jointed rail versus welded, right? Or something like that.
And if you're on a branch line, you're not going to be, oh, I'm going to go to this industry next, so I'm going to go run up ahead and line the switch. I don't have the option of, running 2 miles ahead and lining a switch ahead of time. We're going to have to stop, get off, line the switch, lock it, go in there.
It's funny because that's one of the other things that I wrote down, which was fully stopping for turnouts and during switching maneuvers. So if you're switching out cars, you don't just push onto a cut of cars and keep pushing till you get to wherever you put the train together, connect up the air, right? Make sure it's all working properly. Then you move again. Generally.
Exactly.
Right? Not speeding in yards, like when you're doing a runaround on to get your engine onto the other end of the train. I've seen people are like, oh, this is boring. I just want to speed it up so I can get out of here. Like, no, just run it like you're in a yard. What is the yard, speed limit? 10, 15 miles an hour, something like that, generally. There's no reason to be rushing. Here's one. Fully stopping when coupling and then trying again if it does not couple the first time. They do that in real life. I've seen that.
Oh, yeah. All the
coupler apart, right? Then what about
and then also that we open every knuckle on every move because because if you don't, then they bypass. That's twice as much work. Not to mention you might damage the car or even derail the car. But go ahead.
Right, which would be even worse, I'm sure, than just some damage.
Amazing.
Right?
You derail a customer's car, you're shut down. It's they're gonna have to send a manager out. I don't even want to get into it, but that's another thing. Right, you're right.
Right. Then another one I wrote down was doing all the horn signals and sound effects. I mean, we have these engines with DCC in them, so you can do that stuff. Turn the bell on when you're running around the train in the yard. Honk twice,
which is a requirement to warn people that you're coming through the yard that may not hear you.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like these things to me seem kind of like common sense. If your goal is to role play the job, which to me that's what it's about, And if you're slowing
Right.
down to actually try to enjoy yourself, there's a lot of enjoyment, I think, to be found with this. The next one I have has more to do, I think, with layout owners setting up their operations so that it forces people to be more prototypical, and it's implementing actual interlocking controls during ops. So if you come to anywhere that's in interlocking, make it so that you have to do specific things before the track will change for you. You know, whether that's waiting for the traffic to come through, or making sure some other part of the layout is clear so that you know the train has somewhere to go, that kind of thing. That would, I guess, force people to be more prototypical. And then the last thing I have on here, and I think you do this on your layout, which is using signaling, meaning the signals, the little trackside signals,
Right.
to slow traffic down. In other words, if I come up to one of your signals and it's giving me a yellow, I need to slow down for real and not just go and just look down the aisle to see where the train is that's in the next block that's giving me this yellow. Do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, you immediately reduce to that speed. You immediately reduce to, like on the prototype, you know, you see a yellow signal, you immediately reduce to 30, being prepared to stop short of the next signal. Yeah. That's just a life save. I mean, you can't not do it.
Right. In real life, you have to, because it could be a life or death situation in real life. On the models, obviously, we don't have to worry about killing someone.
As a layout owner, you know, I've spent basically about $70 per signal head per each light, $70. So I don't want people just running red signals. And that is a big peeve of Jeff Abbott, our good friend, the N-scale layout. His layout's all CTC'd, and you know, we just constantly go, watch where you're going. You know, you run your train like you're the engineer. Walk right with it. Don't just let it go and try to figure it out where it's at later. Watch it. It's like you say, the role playing and stuff. If you don't want to do it, maybe you should do something else.
Right. Or don't come to an op session, especially if you're going to an op session where the layout owner has, well, I don't know. I think it's kind of disrespectful anyway to show up and just do what you want anyway. I mean, you kind of have to listen to what their vision is and what the story is that they're trying to tell, and then try to role play that as much as you can.
If I got 3 scale trains engines on the point, that's $900 for the locomotives, and even 12 cars at $50 a pop, that's $600 over the cars. I don't want them smashed into, you know, something else, or side swiping or something, you know, because you weren't paying attention, you know.
Yeah, right. I didn't notice the foul switch, right? There was a car there that you just...
And then another thing too. Yeah, look for the switches ahead. Don't, you know, you foul them and then you get a short circuit or whatever, and that causes the layout to shut down, or even causes a short or whatever too. That's a whole story, you know. Yeah, we're not allowed to foul switches, and we got to stop in the clear and then make sure the switch is lined. You know, look ahead, you know.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of all of these things where you get distracted, and then I've gone 4 or 5 cars, you know, in a reverse move or some shove move down the wrong track. Oh shoot, I went to put it on track 2, I went on track 3. Oop, let me just pull it back up. I mean, I can't imagine that happening, because in the real world, the people working the jobs like you are so deliberate. I mean, you don't want to have to create work for yourself, right?
Right.
So you're going to do it right the first time. It just makes sense to work that way. So anyway,
okay,
we can beat this thing to death some other time, but
but those are all good points, and that was some of the stuff I try to bring up in my you know, if you glean one thing from this, and I'm trying to, you know, I you know, like I say, I spent $1,000 going up there just to do a little clinic on, you know, trying to help people understand things better and maybe try to, you know, run things better. I'm trying to, you know, give my knowledge to the people that, you know, are willing to listen, and you know, you spend thousands of dollars on models, then you want to run them at, unprototyped speeds. I mean, that's not what I want to see.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was at a train show and we had some locomotives out on the table, and this guy comes up and asks the person I was there with, how fast does it go? Like, that really isn't the point.
Yeah.
And that's how people think, though, that don't understand, what this is. I mean, it's a scale model of something that's real,
right.
And the real ones, can they go fast? Well, I mean, I guess, but they're not really designed to, unless you're like on a high-speed passenger. I mean,
it's a business like any other business. You wait in line at McDonald's, you want your food, the good, hot, good, clean, tastes good.
Well, we're talking about McDonald's
fast,
here.
But I mean, it's the same thing. It's a business, otherwise you won't use that business anymore.
Yeah.
It's that's the way it is.
Yep. Well,
okay,
sir,
well, you want to call it an evening here?
Yeah, we'll call it an evening. I do want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to join us on here. It's always a fun discussion.
Yeah, I like doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, if nothing else, I learn a lot. I really hope that the viewers of the channel learn a lot. I don't know. I like it. It's not. Well, I mean, I know a fair number of railroaders that I could probably have on to talk about this stuff. But you have a way of putting stuff that makes me more interested in listening. I don't know if it's from the telling the stories as many times as you have or what, but I really enjoy the time that we get to talk and hang out together.
Yeah, and I urge people to take a look at the video I did for the convention, whatever it was 3 years ago, the Young Brakeman. That video, because that's about a real trip, and we have a lot of photos in it. It's really John did it. John produced it.
Maybe we should mention that officially, and I can link to that in our description.
Yeah, link it, and it's fun. It's interesting. I think a lot of people. I have a lot of great comments on it. John went through a tremendous amount of work.
It's a really wonderful story, actually, Mike, and you did a masterful job telling it. So just so people know, some people watching know they've seen it, but for those of you who don't know who are watching this, we did a video together. Really, it was over Zoom, I think, where
Mike, it was,
right, where this Mike that's sitting next to me here on the screen talked about being a brakeman on the LA BRF, which is a train that Southern Pacific ran from LA to Bakersfield over Tehachapi Pass.
Yeah, well, it continued on to LA to Brooklyn, Oregon, but that part of the run. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah. That was your job, though, right? From LA over the pass to Bakersfield. Yeah, and it's just a great story, and it has a ton of really interesting pictures. You did a great job getting all of the pictures together for that, Mike. And I said, I'll put a link to the video in our description here as soon as I have a chance to.
Right. John Signer was even involved in that. He gave me
I remember,
yeah, and some great old pictures, and a lot of it is funny. It's all the trip took place at night. You were always on a night train, but I think I get a lot of people have written things like, "Wow, we want more of that,"
I'd like to try to do more of that stuff, but I don't know anybody else.
It has like 8,000 views or something like that right now. And
is that all? It should have more. It's better than that.
It's only been on YouTube itself less than a year, I think, though.
I don't know. I'm kind of curious, and I'll look at it later. But anyway, that's on this channel. I think if you just search for Mike Osborne,
you'll find it.
OSBORNE.
Right.
Just like it's listed here on our
It comes up right away. It comes up right away. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great video. Again, Mike, you told the story really well. So
thanks.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Definitely appreciate your time. Appreciate you, Mike. And this happens every time. It's time to go, and I'm searching for this.
Yeah, look, we're almost 2 hours into this. We're almost 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay.
No, that's fine. But hopefully we didn't lose it. I'm sure we lost some people by now. Yeah, I get up at 3:55 in the morning too. So.
Oh well, we should go then. You need to go to sleep soon.
Well, yeah, I haven't even ate dinner yet. Yeah, I smell food
you
in
gotta
the
eat.
background.
Yeah.
Yeah, I smell food in the background.
We're out of here. Mike,
Adios.
thank you.
Hasta
Everybody.
la vista.
Yep. Everybody,
Au
thank you
revoir.
for watching. Yep. All the moderators, thank you for moderating. And
Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the questions.
All of the above. Thanks, Mike. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Yep.